What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we have a very serious topic, and that's tendon injuries or tendon tears. And kind of the catalyst for the video is that in the last year I saw around 5 guys and they all tore their biceps tendon. And if it's one guy you think okay, like whatever, freak accident, but if it's 5 guys you start thinking, okay, like how does that happen and how can I prevent this, because I don't want this happening to me. And 2 of the guys even tore both sides within a year or so. And like I said, we don't want to take the trip to Snap City, okay? We don't want a residence permit in Snap City. We want the visa declined. We want border control to say, you're not invited. Snap City is not for you, right? And how do we do that? That's kind of the question we're going to talk about today. And to kind of set the stage, we're going to watch a video of Larry Wheels, and this just came out recently. This was a boxing fight against a guy named Vitaly. And Vitaly is some kind of kick streamer, and I know most of you are probably too employed to know him. But they had like this celebrity boxing match. Larry Wheels, famous strength athlete, and he kind of, punched him, knocked him down, and in the process he tore his biceps. And here he is shaking his head saying, oh no, because he realized what's actually going on. And biceps tear, like a full biceps tear, you see it right away because you have like this Popeye look that you can notice right away. And yeah, here you see it. It looks disgusting. And we can watch another video where he actually shows the biceps, and he had a prior tear on his other arm. So he says at least they're symmetrical now. He's taking it with a bit of black humor, which is I guess the only thing you can do. But obviously like it's not a pleasant injury to experience, and we're going to talk about not biceps tears specifically today, but tendon tears in general. So first off, some super basic anatomy. What is a tendon? We always hear tendon this, tendon that. A tendon is simply a piece of connective tissue that connects the muscle belly to the bone. So we have muscles, that's contractile tissue that moves the skeleton, and the way the muscles are attached to the bones is via the tendons. And the problem is that often the tendons become the weak link in the chain and the tear. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one is muscles adapt really quickly to training stress. So you have neural gains, you can gain strength almost immediately, and then within a couple of weeks you can actually add contractile tissue, hypertrophy your actual muscles. And the tendons, on the other hand, adapt very slowly. So even like some stiffness adaptations take 8 to 12 plus weeks. And if you want to actually talk about full remodeling, that can take months to years. So the muscles can easily outgrow the tendon's capacity, and that's going to lead obviously to a higher risk of strains. Now that doesn't mean that we want to avoid loading the tendons, because tendons actually adapt to stress as well as bones. So there's this law, it's called Wolff's law, after a German scientist who discovered the effect, is that bones actually adapt to stress and get stronger. So we increase our bone density, and later Davies added to that applies to all the soft tissues. So tendons and ligaments also get stronger when we put mechanical stress on them. So we can say the body in general lies tissue, additional tissue along lines of stress. So how do we actually develop the tendon? Well, the research points to several factors we need to accomplish to get an effective stress that's going to lead to some adaptations. And the first thing we need is high strain, 4.5 to 6.5%. And what does strain mean? It just means that the tendon is going to be lengthened 4.5 to 6.5% compared to the resting position. Okay. Then we need heavier loads, slower tempos, isometrics, and controlled tension. Those are all factors that are going to facilitate better adaptation. And we're going to talk about why that is a little bit later. And classic like pump and bodybuilding work doesn't really load the tendon as much as the muscles. Now we often see Instagram influencers talking about ballistic training, like for example, plyometrics, kettlebell ballistics, mace swings, etc. as a way to bulletproof, quote unquote, the tendons. But the problem with ballistics of all kinds is that while the tendon is placed under very high peak forces, it doesn't spend a lot of time there. So actually we place significant stress on the tendon, but the adaptation we're getting is not really ideal, because the tension is very short-lived, and that's why isometrics are usually used in rehab and are a more reliant way to actually load the tendon, because we spend a lot more time in the effective strain zone. And if you think about it, when the joint angle, right, is consistent and you contract the muscle, all the force has to go into the tendon, and we can really dose and measure the time under strain and also the intensity pretty well. Compared to, for example, a ballistic move where we, I don't know, throw an 80-pound mace behind our head. And you see, this is quite more risky and also less effective in terms of building the actual tendon. Now, as you know, I'm a kettlebell sport athlete and I'm not a fragilista. I'm not telling people to avoid certain movements. I'm just saying be conscious of the risks and be aware of the actual stimulus and adaptation you are getting. Now, let's talk about some other risk factors. So the number one risk factor, I'd say, is probably aging, because with age we just lose cells in the tendon, we get stiffer overall, and collagen synthesis is impaired. There's more degeneration in general and a high risk of injury. And the peak risk is often in middle age, when people are still very strong but the tendons start to degrade. Now obviously we can't prevent aging, but this is just something we can be aware of. Now at 35, I'm paying extra special attention to that, and I'm trying to not be as stupid as I could allow myself to be maybe 15 years ago. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop doing cool stuff. I'm just going to pay more attention to rest and recovery, in particular load management, right? Then another risk factor are PEDs, and specifically exogenous hormones. So a lot of the people, not all of them, I'm not accusing all of them, some of the people I see tear the tendons I believe to be natural, but some of them I know are using PEDs, some of them I know are on supraphysiological levels of testosterone. And there is definite research that shows that use of TRT, what people call TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, increases risk of tendon rupture 2.9-fold compared to non-users. And in bodybuilders who use even higher doses, so higher than TRT, so TRT is supposed to bring your levels up but have you still within the reference range, and obviously supraphysiological levels people use for strength sports, for bodybuilding, pose an even higher risk, with reported lifetime tendon rupture rates of 22% compared to 6% in non-users. So that's that. And there are two mechanisms for that, in my opinion. Number one is obviously what we talked about before, the rate of adaptations in the muscles and in the nervous system as well, outpacing the rate of the tendon adaptation. So people start injecting steroids into their butt, their strength increases rapidly, and then they lift weights their tendons simply aren't ready for. Stupid, but that's what people are going to do. And the other thing, there is a potential mechanism of steroids themselves decreasing collagen synthesis. This is not 100% confirmed, but personally I believe it to be true. And you see that in steroid users who look 40 at age 20, which is also the skin obviously made up of collagen, and it's like the second mechanism. So that's kind of like the risk factors are just loading, ballistic loading, that's putting a lot of stress on the tendons, age, and PD use. Now, what can we actually do to prevent the trip to Snap City? Number one, I would say this is the most important thing, is recovery and days off. So that's the other thing I kind of have observed with certain people, is they lift heavy all the time, every day. We already talked about tendons recovering slower than muscle, and to really, if we put high strain on the tendon to recover, we need at least 24 hours before the next session, but better 48 hours for the same tendon. And I personally do heavy kettlebell training only every other day. I don't train heavy with kettlebells every day. And in general, yeah, more full days of rest, that's going to take you a long way. Number two is sleep. Try to sleep as much as possible, because studies show a much higher risk of musculoskeletal injury. With poor sleep, it's linked to much higher injury rates, because sleep is also when a lot of the actual tissue repair happens. The number three important point is load management. So avoid sudden spikes in volume, intensity, and new high force movements. That's basically all intelligent programming. Number four, hydration and supplementation. So I think honestly the most important part is load management, sleep, proper programming, and now we're getting into the less effective interventions, but staying hydrated is definitely important. Try to drink enough water, and you can also take collagen, peptides, and vitamin C. There's maybe some evidence to show that it can boost collagen synthesis, and you can look up protocols for that. But I believe that's not magic. I'm personally not doing that. Might do it sometime in the future. Now we can talk about specific training protocols to actually strengthen the tendons. And like I talked about in the beginning, we are going to talk about isometrics. So isometrics, you can do them at mid-range and also at end range, so where the muscle is stretched. And both of them are going to load the tendon effectively. Like, what's the difference? In mid-range, you have the highest potential for force output, and it's also going to be probably a little bit gentler on the tendon. That's why it's usually used in rehab purposes. And end range is when the muscle is already in a stretched position. And obviously when you already have muscle in a stretched position and then you start contracting it, you're going to put a lot of force into the tendon, and that's really going to be very effective as a training intervention. Maybe I'm going to make a video in the future on some specific protocols. Another one I want to talk about, and there's not a lot of scientific evidence for it, but a lot of anecdotal evidence, like people talk about it, and I have also experimented with that, and I think it's effective, and that's just doing very high repetition movement. That's not going to load the tendon a lot, like we talked in the beginning, but you get a huge pump, and it's going to basically circulate the blood in the general area. And this is something, for example, when I tweaked my elbow in jiu-jitsu, I would usually do triceps push downs with a band, 100 reps, biceps curls with a band, 100 reps, and sometimes up to 3 rounds, and you feel really the blood flow and circulation to the general area. And I believe those kinds of protocol can provide some immediate relief. So that's something to have in the toolbox as well. So that's it for today, basically. Number one, I don't recommend steroids. I don't even recommend TRT. Obviously talk to your doctor, blah blah, but I think most people don't need it. And when we talk about super physiological levels of steroids, of testosterone, I think the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So I'm not going to do that in the foreseeable future. Secondly, load management, rest and recovery, sleep. Okay, don't train like an idiot. Like, load your tendons like I do bunch of crazy stuff, but make sure to have full days of rest and don't train heavy back to back. Don't swing a fucking 80-pound mace every day or jerk 40-kilogram kettlebells every day, okay? Because it's going to make the trip to Snap City more likely, especially as you get older, right? But we can't do anything about aging yet. And the other thing is, you can supplement and you can start incorporating some specific training protocols to increase your tendon strength, specifically isometrics and the high rep pump work, which doesn't have a lot of scientific evidence behind it, but anecdotal evidence, I believe it does something. So guys, I hope you found this interesting. Stay far away from Snap City and see you next time.